Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is another mid-month wrap-up. This feels really weird to be standing. It is super hot here already today, and I'm trying to do this quickly before we turn the AC on because I'm still too nervous to film a video, a complete video at least, with the AC on the entire time because it is very loud. I feel like I need to be closer to the camera and it's weird. Anyway, let's get right into it. This first book I actually finished the very last day of May, but it was in the evening, so I'd already filmed my May wrap-up at that time, and that is The Project by Courtney Summers. This is a YA thriller or mystery, and it actually came out just a few months ago, and I ended up giving this 1.5 stars. It definitely didn't live up to my expectations. Also, the description of this book is very misleading, as you will now hear. So, 13-year-old Lo wakes up from a car crash that killed her parents to find that her sister has abandoned her for a cult called the Unity Project. After trying for several years to gain access to her sister, Lo finally gives up and moves on with her life. Some years later, the Unity Project is brought back into her life in the form of witnessing a suicide of one of its members. This brings up dark questions about the project, and this time Lo will not give up so easily. So this was absolutely nothing like I expected. It actually ended up being pretty boring. The description on the back really makes it seem like that Lo is going to team up with the father of the man who committed suicide and kind of try to infiltrate the Unity Project and discover like their dark secrets and stuff like that, which seemed really interesting to me. It does not go in that direction at all. The father is an extremely minor character. He's mainly only there in the beginning of the book, and that's it. Most of this book is actually just conversations between Lo and several members of the cult. Most of it is literally just her like going to work, going to the cult, going home, and repeats. Like, it's just the same thing repeated several times before anything actually really happens or is revealed or anything. This is also a multiple timeline. It also shows the perspective of her sister from some years in the past, but it really didn't add much at all to the story itself. It doesn't tell us much. It just kind of reveals some of her thoughts, I suppose. And that's about it, honestly. And just like with Sadie, the climax of this book happens off screen, which I absolutely detest because I want answers, a la Zach Bagans. And the main character it happens to can't even remember what happened, so we absolutely don't get any answers at all as to what happens at the very end of this book. So we don't get any closure for it at all. And unfortunately, this just kind of ends up being a stereotypical cult story. It doesn't really add anything new to this genre. It's not really educational even at all. So this has to do with the cult, so I'm really interested in like the psychology and the sociology and everything behind how cults form and everything like that, and how people can be so influenced. And I got none of that. It was just not worth it really, and unfortunately I bought this book, which is why I actually have it to show you, and meh. Next is actually a manga because I joined NetGalley recently, and on there you can request to receive e-arcs of books to read and review, and I was approved to receive the e-arc of this, and that is Undead Girl Murder Farce Volume 1, which is quite a mouthful. This is by Yugo Osaki and Haruka Tomoyama. This is a horror manga, as you can probably tell by the cover. It comes out June 15th, which, as the moment I'm filming this, is tomorrow. And I actually gave this a 4 out of 5, although it's probably more between like a 3 and a 4 than an actual 4. So this one takes place at the end of the 19th century. A vampire's wife is murdered, and the detective known as the Cage User is called in to solve the crime. But there's more to the detective and the curtained birdcage he carries. After all, when solving a case involving a monster, it might just take one to know one. So the art in this is definitely a 5 out of 5. The character designs themselves are very, very pretty and just nice to look at. The clothes and everything I really like and are detailed. There's some really, really detailed, like finely detailed scenes, and I just love like admiring some of the pages because it's just so gorgeous. And I love books like that because I was really into art as a child, and so seeing worlds and stuff brought to life through art, I just really enjoy. So that's definitely the main selling point of this manga, as the story for me, especially in this first volume, is only 3 out of 5. You can definitely tell it's a first volume, as they kind of have to do a bit of an info dump just to try and kind of get things rolling, so there's not as much action in this one as there probably will be in further volumes. However, it ended on the perfect cliffhanger, so I immediately wanted to read volume 2, but obviously that's not around yet. So it definitely was good at wanting you to read and continue with the series. At the very beginning, I loved this. This is what like hooked me into this book. At the very beginning, there is a reference to the painting Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix. It is a French painting and it is one of my favorites, and I just thought that reference was just so smart since this takes place in France, and so I just thought it was a fantastic reference and a good way to open the story. Next is another manga that I was approved to read and review through NetGalley, and that is Boys Run the Riot by Kato Gaku. This is a LGBTQIA plus manga. It comes out this year, although this is the English version. The Japanese version came out last year, and I give this a 4 out of 5. Our main character, Rio, is a transgender teen that is afraid of standing out from their peers. He reiterates a few times that the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. Because of this, he's flustered easily, awkward in social situations, doesn't have many friends, and just stays quiet. However, when a new kid joins the class, Jin, that all changes. So the first 3 panels of this are the only part that are in like full color, and they are absolutely gorgeous. Like, I had really high expectations going into this because of that. It was just such a great way to be introduced into the story. But then the art style, it really goes back and forth between being really pretty and just looking like they didn't put enough time in it. Like, there's some panels that definitely don't look very good and aren't as clean as they should be. It is very inconsistent. The reason I gave this a 4 instead of a 5, like most people, is that the story really moves way too quick for me. Rio pretty much changes like that just overnight. His entire personality, he goes from being like this anxiety-riddled teen to really being assertive and standing up for himself. And it doesn't really give us any reason for that to happen. And him and Jin had only spent very little time together. So it was such an instantaneous change that just didn't really seem believable. And it was just like, whoa, how is this the same character kind of thing? Also, there's a scene in the beginning when Jin is introduced. Rio actually judges Jin right away based on how he looks. And obviously it's very hypocritical because Rio doesn't want other people to do that. And I thought it would have been really interesting for Rio to analyze like why he was so quick to judge Jin. And I really wanted that to be kind of brought up again and for him to kind of realize what he was doing. But it's never really talked about again, and it's just kind of like, that would have been a good opportunity. That would have been really interesting. But since the story moved so fast, the character development and the friendship between Jin and Rio just wasn't as impactful as it really could have been. The representation is obviously great. Rio is transgender, and at the very end of the story, we're actually introduced to a genderqueer character. So I think it'll be really interesting as the series goes on, how much more representation we will see from the characters. The next book is one I had to read for the local book club I'm in, as it is the pick for this month, and that is The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. This is a historical fiction. It came out in 2020, and I gave this a 2.5 out of 5, but it's probably closer to a 2 the more I think about it. So this is a bit of a long description, so bear with me for a moment here. Escaping from an abusive marriage, 17-year-old Lakshmi makes her way alone to the vibrant 1950s pink city of Jaipur. There she becomes the most highly requested henna artist and confidant to the wealthy women of the upper class, but trusted with the secrets of the wealthy, she can never reveal her own. Known for her original designs and sage advice, Lakshmi must tread carefully to avoid the jealous gossips who could ruin her reputation and her livelihood. As she pursues her dream of an independent life, she is startled one day when she is confronted by her husband, who has tracked her down these many years later with a high-spirited young girl in tow, a sister Lakshmi never knew she had. Suddenly, the caution that she has carefully cultivated as protection is threatened. Still, she perseveres, applying her talents and lifting up those that surround her as she does. Okay. So, the description of this book was really interesting to me, and I thought I was really going to enjoy this. However, this book moves so fucking slow. It is just so slow that I kind of couldn't stand it at times. And not much actually happens. Even the climax is just very short-lived. It's just kind of a blip in the entire story. And it's definitely a very meandering book. I did find the first third of the book fascinating, as it talks more of like the henna business and the women that Lakshmi is servicing and stuff. I just thought that was really interesting, how she talked about the patterns and how she learned how to paint and how she learned how to henna and where she learned all these designs and stuff from. I just thought the history behind that was fascinating. And when we're introduced to her sister, Radha, I believe her name is, she's a very sympathetic character at first. And so it really seems like this is going to be like a very like sisterly story. It's going to be about family and stuff like that. But then Radha very quickly turns into a spoiled brat. Like, she came from absolutely nothing. Her parents died, the village called her bad luck girl. Like, she didn't have anything to her name, and she didn't know like what anything was. She didn't know anything about like modern amenities, anything like that. She'd never been to a big city before, so like everything was new and shiny to her. But oh my god, she's so ungrateful for everything Lakshmi does and sacrifices for her. Like, she could have had such like a wonderful life and been so well educated, but she just kind of throws it all away. And I know she's a teenager, so teenagers are tough and everything, but I absolutely hated this character in the end. And because of her, I actually kind of lost interest in the book, because I just wanted to know more about Lakshmi and see her succeed and stuff. And Radha was just kind of like ruining everything. This writing style is very descriptive and vibrant, but however, by the end of the book, since I was so kind of bored with it, I did find myself skimming just to like the next dialogue parts, because it's like, I don't need 2 or 3 paragraphs describing how someone looks sitting at a desk. Like, I just want to move the plot forward at this point. One thing though that I thought was really interesting looking at the reviews on Goodreads is there's a lot of reviews from people that live in India or lived most of their lives in India that absolutely detest this book. I guess it is a very fantasized view of India and a very Western view of India. And I didn't find this out till later, but the author herself only lived in India until she was 9, and then she was taken to the United States, I believe, and she hasn't been back. And so it's just, I guess, Indian reviewers just really have a problem with that, and that it is such a book that's written in a way to really appeal to Western audiences than really be factual in what it's saying. I can really understand where they're coming from with that, so I thought that was a very interesting perspective to add in here. This last book was unfortunately a DNF for me. It just wasn't for me in the end, and that is How to Pronounce Knife. And I don't know if I can pronounce the author's name, so I'll just kind of pop it up here, because I don't want to slaughter the name, I'm sorry. But this came out in 2020. It's a collection of short stories by this author, and I got through the first 4 stories before putting it down. It just wasn't what I expected, and other people might like this. I know some booktubers I watch gave this a 5 and 4 and stuff. So it just wasn't what I was looking for. However, the stories that make up How to Pronounce Knife focus on characters struggling to find their bearings in unfamiliar territory, or shuttling between idioms, cultures, and values. A failed boxer discovers what it truly means to be a champion when he starts painting nails at his sister's salon. A young woman tries to discern the invisible but immutable social hierarchies at a chicken processing plant. A mother coaches her daughter in the challenging art of worm harvesting. So, for example, I did read the chicken plant one. I think it was the second story or something like that. And honestly, like, that story, for example, is about a woman who's like, you only have two choices if you live in this town. You either work at the strip club or the chicken plant. So she worked at the chicken plant. And she doesn't see herself as a beautiful person. And I guess a lot of the women at the chicken plant get nose jobs and end up like being with the manager there and stuff, even though he's married. And there's a man at the chicken plant that is in love with her and really wants to be with her, but she always just kind of pushes him away, but at the same time is being like, oh, no one thinks I'm pretty, no one's gonna love me, I just want a nose job. And so I don't know, I just found it like really weird. It could have gone like deeper into it, but it just kind of stops abruptly because it's a short story, obviously. So like I said, just not for me in the end. So this ended up being a really unusual reading month for me. Nothing was really like spectacular 5 out of 5, but what I read for NetGalley actually ended up being the best reads for this month so far for me. Currently I'm reading a book for a different reading vlog that I've been filming since April actually, so I'm not really gonna talk about that at all, but I don't know, I feel like this is almost putting me in a reading slump, so I just kind of hope that the rest of this month will be better reading wise, because I really need it. But as always, thank you for hanging out with me. I feel like I didn't know what to do with my arms the whole time here. It's unusual. We'll see if I can get used to filming here or if I should try something else. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, as that helps me out a lot. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.